Welcome to Chronic Curiosity. This episode was um, technical difficulties spewed all over it. There is no video. There was, but there wasn't. It was a disaster. The audio is messed up in the beginning, but we figured it out. At least we have the audio. Enjoy Dan Leach, who is a fantastic soul. Hopefully, we'll see him again soon.
Thank you for saying all those things. That's so kind. I don't know, man. I'm
Um,
I'm just I'm just trying to survive over
Dan, hold
here.
on one second.
Um,
So when I
yeah,
restarted everything, I screwed it all up.
yeah.
So it wasn't recording you at all.
Well, we'll
So
run
we
it
can
back,
we
man.
can restart again. So here we go.
Yeah,
Dan Leach is
yeah.
with us, and we just talked for like 5 minutes, and I screwed stuff up. It is recording you now. I can see it clearly. Man, I'm sorry. This whole thing has been a whole disaster because, well, at least the last hour has been because I haven't been able to figure all the things out. The video is going to be, choppy, but the audio seems to be clear. It looks like you're recording now. I just went on a 5 minute spiel about how awesome of a person you are and how the first time, we met, Tony had told me that you were a person that just, you feel like, and I can subscribe to that. And it was a fantastic experience, walk in the door. Like I just said, Lily, this is so weird. I've never done this before. We're like, it didn't work out. And like, I'm repeating myself 45 seconds later and I feel like a complete idiot. Um, but I asked you, what do you think that is that just makes you, have that aura where people just feel like they know you. And then you kind of deferred to asking Tony because you wish you could answer that. So really rough start there, but it's you're a special breed, and that's why you're here. And we've talked about you before. So
Oh, thank you.
wherever we were at before I interrupted you.
In the time it took us to restart, I think I came up with a theory. So I'm
Okay.
I'm still going to defer to Tony because again, I think maybe others see us more clearly than we see ourselves. That's a theory I've held for a while, but I was thinking about it. I'm an introvert. Like I'm a painfully and and always have been a painfully uh, sort of interior person, shy, reserved, um, and so maybe it's a form of overcompensation. I don't know. Um, maybe there's the sense that I'm reaching out because at the same time that I love people and I love connecting with people, but at the same time I have to be strategic about it. I have to sort of prompt myself to do it because my spirit animal is the turtle, and I will climb into my shell or find the corner of a room or find some way to hide in any social situation because of how deeply uncomfortable connection makes me, though I love it and I want it. If
Oh no,
that's okay as a
you're
contradiction.
yeah, you're honestly right now you're preaching to the choir because
Yeah.
that's me. And we've talked about it a handful of times where I never would have done this right now. This starting a podcast and let alone recording it and putting it out there. And, and my wife's even mentioned it that weekend that we were down in North Carolina playing music with yourself and Erica that, she saw something switch, another little tiny, one of my many switches that have been flipped throughout the years. She saw something flip there that she had never seen me in that setting like that. And honestly, I had never seen me in a setting like that. So I can totally understand where you're coming from as far as really enjoying it, but you have to put yourself there because because it's not easy
Yeah.
to just to find. I don't find myself there. Where I feel like Tony finds himself in those situations where he's just like, all right.
I think for you, Dan, you have this weird ability, man, to kind of like see yourself and others. And so when you're able to do that, I think then people become more comfortable and they see some of themselves in you, and then I think they feel like they've met you at some point in their life, or they've met someone that reminds them of you, if that makes sense.
Sure, sure. Well, and isn't it true that despite, and I think we are living in a time that's sort of intent on highlighting differences. I think we're sort of obsessed with demarcations and are you in this category or in this category, and how can we break people into groups? Isn't it still true that we have more in common than we do in difference? I don't know. I swivel between these worlds. I mean, academia is one world, and then I come home to, like, these small neighborhoods in South Carolina, and I go to church, and then I call people, and it's all these worlds are so disparate, and yet it's never hard to kind of see over a wall and connect with people. Has that been y'all's experience?
Yeah, it is. And I think you really hit on it where and I don't, my problem is I like to understand the root causes of things.
Ooh, yeah.
And I don't know why everything is so divisive. And I think that's a huge reason why we started doing this was, I don't know if there's so many factors, and to just blame it on one thing, I think is silly. Either social media where people are, literally living their lives off of screens and those 30-second clips or those, 30-second interactions, and to be able to just sit down and have an open conversation for hours is something, people don't do. And they think, well, I'll go to my friend's house, we'll, have a, bonfire, or, go to the bar and have a conversation with somebody, but there's never like a, unbroken conversation that just goes and that just organically occurs. And maybe there is, and maybe I've just never been parts of them, and I'm just now finding the being fascinated by that and having those discussions with people. But it seems like we have been more divided, than we have been in, years and years. And then I also asked the question of, maybe that's just because I'm getting older and I can see it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I was just 20 and I didn't see how stupid people were. And now I'm, mid 30s and I'm like, wow, people can be really stupid sometimes. So, is there more of it, or am I just realizing that it's there? I don't know, but it is. I think it's safe to say this year, things are particularly bad with relationships between people that have those small disagreements. But, like you said, we're all just humans. We're all trying to get through life and be happy at the end of it. That's the way.
Yeah. We were talking before, we in the unrecorded session, about the ways in which media can reduce a narrative into something that is very clean and very tidy. And because it's so clean and because it's so tidy and lacking in nuance, it moves, right? And I think we were talking about the Me Too movement in particular, and there's almost an aversion to being able to hold two contradictory ideas, right? In the same conversation, that a system such as Hollywood is incredibly abusive and riddled with predators, but that also men are misrepresented. Men are often misunderstood. And I know in some of my conversations, it's like Fred, I love that you talked about, like, it just takes time. There's a conversation that is a longer, messier, more uncomfortable conversation where we can talk about both of those realities. Whereas, like, the easy conversation is men are villains, and we're going to cancel anyone who gets in our way. And so that's why I think the work that you guys are doing is so important, is because where else do you have the 2-hour or the 3-hour conversation where you can sort out all the nuance, and you could say something stupid and get corrected, or you could say something undeveloped and then be given time to like complicate it or subvert it or add to it. We just don't make space for that anymore, do we?
Yeah.
All right. He just says it. So it's like everything that I'm thinking, he just tidies it up and just puts it in a package. And it's like, here, this is how you should say it. Like, yeah.
Bro, it's going to be like on Key and Peele when he was the president and he was Obama and he had the translator on his shoulder. That's going to be Dan on his shoulder.
Dude, it is. Everything. It's insane.
Yeah.
Like you say all those things and it's like, yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. I have a very difficult time articulating those things as well. But I think that's I guess to me in my own mind, I've kind of thought, it's when I hear people say like, oh, like your show's done this, or this conversation that you had about this is really, really, touched me or really, made me think. And then to hear you say the work that we're doing, most of the time it's just drinking all this bourbon and having a great time. But,
But you can't do both, like you were saying.
yeah. And that's what
things.
yeah. Like, and being able to have those long form conversations and being able to make mistakes. And, I think we mentioned it before we started recording is, how do you make a mistake and be able to come back from that? Because I mean, you think about it as humans, like as a child, you make a mistake. I mean, you're learning. You don't learn very much without making mistakes. So how can we start doing that for adults? Make a mistake. Well, here's why this is a mistake, and here's what we can do about it. I think is an important piece of that, and there's just so much that gets muddled. And to be able to talk about those nuances, and I don't think 3 hours is nearly long enough to figure out how the world works, but it's better than tweeting somebody and whatever it is, like 150 characters, and that's all you got, and expecting to understand someone's point on that.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine. She's an incredibly talented writer and feminist and academic. And we were talking about a man who had sort of been disgraced through the Me Too movement, through what now appear to be questionable allegations. And I put that question to her fairly directly. I said, what does it look like for him to recover? And she's way too civil to like raise her voice or be like overtly aggressive, but in a very intense way, she informed me that like that's not what this moment is about. Like this moment, this was back in 2018, or maybe 2019. She seemed to think, and I hear this a lot, that a moment, that when we have a moment and we can spotlight an issue, that it can only be one voice or one narrative. Because she said, I don't want to, like, I'm not interested in that. That's not what this is for. Like, this is for hearing victims, or this is for making systemic reform. And I wonder, again, if we're doing sort of a work of reduction, right? We're sort of saying that a moment can't hold 2 stories or 3 stories or 4 stories, that we can't hold more than one idea and then just sit in the tension created by that. Because again, we were talking about this before we hit record. That writer and that man in question was falsely accused. And so there was an enormous amount of damage done to his career and his reputation. And now we've sort of moved on, and I don't know what it looks like to recover him. I don't know that there is a prescription for that.
No one ever considers the person dealing with the fallout after, particularly when they're falsely accused. I think that's scary to think about. And I think
horrifying.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people consider that now, where, and maybe it's a good thing, in a sense. I think there are some good things to take out of that is, when you come to, classifying a certain type of person, there are groups that have been classified in certain categories, and, sometimes other people that haven't ever had that need to understand that, hey, this happens on a daily basis to this group, or, these people think this about, there's so much going on around the world that I think a lot of people are insulated from, particularly in the United States.
Sure,
We have a lot of
sure.
problems for sure. We have a ton of problems that need fixed, but there's a lot of problems around the world that, you know, I think we find ourselves bickering about, issues that they may be important. I'm not saying they're not important, but there's a lot of things around the world that might be deemed a little more important. It's like, yeah, having the family that complains about what they're eating for dinner that night because they don't, one kid doesn't like macaroni and cheese and they throw a fit and they're not going to eat. But, well, there's a family right next door that doesn't have anything to eat. So, let's kind of weigh, our situation and try to keep that in focus, I think is an important thing that we've lost,
Yeah, for sure. What has the pandemic, you mentioned focus and like this sense of perspective as far as other people's suffering and what is and what isn't important. How has the pandemic affected your sense of perspective and focus?
What about you, Tony? I think feel like you've ran down a different path this year along with myself as well, but
Yeah, and mine was a little bit different. Mine's less the pandemic and more my job, I think, just because
Okay.
of the differences in kind of the socioeconomic status. And with those differences through the socioeconomic status from the pandemic, it made me acutely aware of, some of the disparities between these people and these people, and some of the hardships and how important some of these stimulus packages are, and the extended unemployment, and just crazy stuff, man. We hear statistics about money, and it's not that I don't ever think about money, but that people, if they had something large pop up, a large expense, and in this particular article, it was like $400. It was like 30 or 40% of people couldn't come up with $400, and I was like,
Right.
ooh. I was like, dude, what is going on, man? Like, there's something's going on, and you kind of have to ask, like, why is that, man? Why is that? Like, take it back all the way. Is that parents? Is that school? Is that, some teaching kids, prudency in spending and finance, or I don't know, man. So to me, just, the disparities in socioeconomics, it was opened up even more. Number one, because of the position I'm in, and number two, I think because of the increasing, like I said, increasing disparities in the pandemic, where it seems like either people are just, they're hit super hard and they don't have money, or they're flourishing. Like they just,
Sure.
they have more money now because they're staying home and they're not commuting and they don't have to spend money on gas or whatever it is. So I think that, not that I didn't know that existed. I guess the rich and the poor, the classes, but I think it's amplified now even more.
yeah, that's for sure. And I think it's been a lot of things have been perpetuated by it, and it's so wild to because this is something that we've never dealt with. But then it's like, well, there's a lot of people saying that, well, maybe this shouldn't have been as extreme, the things that have happened, and the lockdowns and all these different things. But I think for me, the biggest thing out of it has kind of opened my eyes to taking that more nuanced perspective of, all right, just one thing isn't just this thing because it looks like this thing or somebody says it is this thing.
Sure.
I want to find out, what is this thing for myself. I've made the joke a ton of times on the podcast, the flat earth. I don't know that the earth isn't flat or it's round because I haven't seen it, because I haven't done the research. You know what I mean? I haven't been in space to see it with my own eyes, and I
Right.
make the joke, but it's, I guess hyperbolic to say the least, but at the same time, it's not. Like, I don't know. So I think this year, so many things have really, when I hear something, it's, and I was told, when I was young, and it, not to, this isn't connected with the Me Too discussion we had, but it's, there's his story, there's her story, and then somewhere
Absolutely.
there's the truth. You know, and it might be a lot of times on the side of this side or that side, or it might be in the middle, or it might be neither of their stories and they're both liars. But I don't want to pass judgment on either of them until I do my due diligence and really try to understand what's going on. And I think, you know, across the board with, you know, the pandemic and, you know, social issues and all these things that, you know, we need to, at least in my perspective, we need to just stop. We need to stop listening to the very first thing we hear and go, really? Is that the truth? Like, what's the points behind here? What's the facts? Like, what's the details?
General overall lacking common sense is one huge thing that I mean,
Yeah.
what in the world? Like I know that, and I'm not saying I have the most common sense ever, but people just aren't even, they don't possess, you know, that hermeneutic of suspicion. It's just gone, man. It's not there. Like, hey, let's and I'm not saying you shouldn't do these things, but the whole, you know, put the mask on, the distancing thing, the shutting, you know, states down for, I think there's reasons for all those. And I've heard actually great explanations for them, but you know, when people blindly subscribe to certain things or they believe something without even questioning it, or government officials who I don't think they, you know, I don't think they have a clue. And then instead of consulting experts or at a minimum explaining things like Florida, you know, with just kind of opening up the state. I'm not saying that was a bad thing or a good thing, but you know, at least take the time to explain, you know, this is the predicted mortality rate if we don't do anything. This is a predicted mortality rate if, you know, we do something, but all these people end up losing their jobs, and suicide rates go higher, mental health rates go higher, abuse, all these things, and kind of paint that picture for society to see. But just that lack of common sense was just amplified, magnified, whatever you want to call it. So
I think the scary thing too is not even the lack. I mean, the lack of common sense is the first, but when you question the lack of common sense, or you just question the experts, you know, maybe they're right, but the second, it's not even saying that they're wrong. It's just asking the question, well, is that really true? And there's been so much of a, just as soon as you ask the question, you're just, you know, tarred and feathered and like canceled. Like, wait, I'm just asking the question here. Like, I just want to know, like, you know, it's dangerous.
There's an immediate and uncritical acceptance of policy and of ideology. But Tony, we were even talking, you see it in the language, you see it in our vocabulary. Yeah. Tony was running down these words that he just hates hearing, because they're if not empty, then they're just unchallenged. So you think about a phrase like the new normal, or unprecedented, or echo chamber.
I hate that word. That's
gaslighting, or systemic. I mean, all of these, you know, even more fraught terms like privilege. We weren't really using these before 2020, at least not in the way that we're using them now. And Fred, I love what you said. It's, are we even stopping to ask, what does it mean for our language to be changed so quickly and so radically? And should it be? Right. Do we even know what these words mean? And when we use them in conversation, does the word privilege mean the same thing to you as it means to me? Or are we starting a war based off possibly just a misconnection, a misunderstanding?
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing, is that misconnection and misunderstanding. I had my wife, God bless her soul, has taken a beating vocally from me this year, just from all my ideas that I constantly spit out at her. And she has her own list of words. She doesn't want to hear nuanced. She hates that one now because I use it so much, you know, and things like that, where it's, you know, we talk about the definition of words, and it's, well, I'm using this word per its definition. This is, you know, it's in the dictionary. This is what it means. Well, maybe it means something to somebody else. Well, okay, I can semi understand that, but just because you want the definition of a word to be different doesn't make it so. Like, you can't just take a word and say, I'm gonna make a new definition for this, and this is right and you're wrong. Like, well, we have to come to a general consensus as a group of people for our language to mean the same thing to people, or, you know, our language doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and I think we need to rethink. So language. You're thinking about language as like a bonding solution, right? As something that offers connection
Or even
and
communication.
yeah, absolutely. And I think about that. I also think a lot about the stakes of language in terms of art, right? I mean, we all write songs. Um, we all use language as a way to cut, right? As a way to sort of um, cut into a topic or cut into a subject matter in a different way. And I think a lot. There was a writer named Martin Amis. He was a British writer, and he said, "Art is war against cliche." And I think about cliches that slip into our language, and the reason we take to them is because when it's new and when everyone's using it, there's a sort of herd instinct that kicks in, and it's like, oh, I want to say systemic, I want to say, nuanced. And I've got a dozen. My wife grills me too. I love that you shared that about Cassie. Hannah's all over. She catches my repetitions. But I love that idea that what it means to write a good song or create a good sentence is actually to go to war against those cliches, against those hollowed and trite phrases, and to say something true, but to say it in a way that cuts differently.
Right.
Right?
Oh yeah. I think that goes back to our, before we started recording, the Zach Bryan discussion.
Yes.
He's simple, he's raw, but when you read his lyrics and you put the idea behind them together, it's like, whoa, this guy has something. We've talked about it before in the podcast too, where it's like, he's rough around the edges, with his lyrics and his writing and everything else, but it's just, you listen to his words and the ideas that, that this person is bringing across. And it's, it's crazy that somebody that, isn't some kind of insanely articulate scholar or something, or, philosopher is able to touch people, in that way. And, I think it was the last one I made the joke about when I first started listening to him. I was like, oh, it's good. Like a new artist. And then, a month later you're crying to the whole album in your bedroom, it's like,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and Zach Bryan's one of those people that, like, I'll be honest and say it, like, there's not a whole lot of people that have made me cry more than Zach Bryan. And I'm not much of a crier. Like it's, for someone like that, just out of nowhere to use their language to, get around those, those phrases, and you so often use things and, just put some words together, and it just to be able to just hit you like a sledgehammer. You're like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah. Have you ever heard someone say, you ask them like, what kind of music are you into? And they say everything. And then you put a little pressure on them, and you're like, no, really, like, give me a favorite genre, give me a favorite artist. And inevitably they say something to the effect of, I don't really listen to the words. I listen to the beat. And I think there's a legitimacy in that, right? Because it's like rhythm and melody, like those things are a different form of grammar.
That's why
But
I
think that's right, man. But I think like someone like Zach Bryan, who Tony turned me on to Zach maybe 6 months ago, he refuses to let you slide, right? If a cliche has no teeth, right, it cuts nothing. You're able to slide over it. And if someone were to say like, what is that song about, or how did it make you feel? I don't know. There's just a lot of music that just it's slick. You just slide right over it. And my wife listens to this stuff when she's an artist, and she says, I can't listen to anything that demands too much of me. Like I have to just listen to something that's like slick and empty and catchy, and it's just sort of, I can bop my head to it and work. And then you run across someone like Zach Bryan or early Isbell. We were talking about Isbell from like Southeastern with songs like Elephant.
Oh,
or
that was the one I had. I was literally thinking of that song as you said it.
Oh man, there's a novel. There's an entire novel. There's an entire universe in that song, and there's nothing to slide over. It refuses to let you slide. It cuts you with every line. Yeah, man. Those are who else do you guys have you been listening to? Who else has been cutting you?
I mean, I think always the White Buffalo is one of mine. that
For
just,
sure. Yeah.
and kind of the same way that Zach Bryan does in a sense. They're different. But it's his rawness, and it's just something that you can tell like this guy's just creating something from his soul, and it's
Yeah.
not just this cookie cutter, whatever rhythm and words. It's, he'll go from, anything from like, like an I Am the Moon to, he'll talk and like Whistler, or the, what's the one song that he talks about coming back from war, and, the line, I put a pistol to my head just to feel something real. And it's just like, and that song is only like a minute and a half long, but that one word is just like, holy cow, like to be able to just to consider that. And that's a reality for people. And it's just, stuff like that, where he said that the stuff I can't just slide over. This guy, no wonder this guy's an author.
Yeah. Tony, how about you? Who have you been listening to?
Not much of anybody, to be honest, man. More just kind of podcasts and stuff. Obviously, a little bit of Zach Bryan. Got on a little Beastie Boys kick. That was kind of fun.
That's always a good time.
So, but nothing groundbreaking, I guess.
I'll even throw a little like Ryan Bingham in there every once in a while, or
Sure.
But I think, like you said, it's just when I have a really hard time. Like I'll go, once I found the White Buffalo, I was really stuck on him for, Jake Smith. I was really stuck on him for a long time.
Yeah.
But to me, I do that a lot. It seems like now throughout my past, where I go so long before really enjoying a new artist, because I don't feel like there's a whole lot of artists out there that, to use your phrase, that cut you, like some people do.
Yeah.
And at the same time having good music, because there's some people that have great lyrics, but you're like, your music's not all that great. But yeah, the Isabel thing was
I think the older I get, I don't know if you guys are like this, but when I was young, maybe like in my teens, it was about discovering new, right? I remember being of that generation that had the P2P downloading stuff, the LimeWire, and the Kazaa, and the I guess all those post Napster softwares.
After they shut Napster down.
Yeah. And I was a fiend. I would just hunt out like new music, and I would find a band, and then I would try to find bands that are similar to it. And it was about scope. It was about sort of trying to reach the boundaries of a genre. I would get really into the blues, and it would be like, all right, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Son Thomas, but there was no depth. And the older I get, I'm almost obsessive. If I get a book or an album or a show, I loop it. I sit with it much longer than I did when I was, maybe in my teens and my 20s. Are you guys increasingly like that? Are you compulsive in the way that you listen or the way you read?
I've been like that my entire life with everything. But it's my thing, as I've talked about too. I get to the point where, whether it's learning a new skill or learning about something or the music, it's when I start getting good at it, or when I start really kind of understanding the concept, I'm like, okay, I kind of understand what this is about now. What's next? Let me learn something new. But even like the music, the lyrics, like I guess they've always been like that. Where even when I was younger, I used to listen to 311 a lot. But I remember catching, because it was catchy, and it was like, okay, it'd bring me back. But then I started listening to some of their stuff that wasn't, on MTV when they actually played, music. But like I remember the one line, it's always stuck with me, that they said, people want PT, they want AU. Let me tell you what you really ought to do. In fact, figure out ways to master silicon, fiber optic connectors, whatever's beyond. And I was like, and the very first time I heard it, I was like, what the heck is that? And then I started thinking about it. I was like, oh, well, PT and AU, it's gold, that they're element symbols. And I'm like, okay, all right, I got to figure out what these guys are about. Like, I need to look into this, stuff like that, where it's like, wait a minute, it's not just that surface level stuff, even though, they have a certain strand of following, I'll say. But, they have some stuff like artists like that just, people that kind of think outside of that box, or people that can teach you something, or, create a thought experiment in your own head that goes to weird places. I've always kind of enjoyed that.
Isn't it interesting when an artist can make you do some of the work, right? They can sort of create a code, but they don't hold your hand to crack the code.
Yeah.
When you do that work, it opens up a completely different kind of intimacy with that work. That's something I'm always, as I write, I think we all want so badly to be clear. Like, we're always striving for clarity and accessibility. But if you go too far and you do all the work, and there's no interpretation or no code cracking for the listener, the reader to do, you're really limiting the kind of relationship the audience is going to have with that work. And I too, Fred, was a big 311 fan. I still remember the navy blue album, and they had the logo smack dab in the center.
Yeah.
It had Down
Yep.
as track. Oh, I don't know, 3 or 4. I used to skateboard at 311 in my little suburban bubble.
Well, they get a bad rap, for just like pothead music or whatever. But I mean, when you break down some of their lyrics, it's like, oh wow, these. I mean, some of the bands out there that they aren't just people out there that are out there partying and playing music. Well, the same thing like with Rage. Tom Morello, he graduated from Harvard, right? Like, the dude's not a dummy. But talking about artists and not painting that clear picture, I feel like somebody else does that very well. I feel like it's got to be Mr. Dan Leach. I've been reading the Through Fire and Floods, and I got it up here. It's up here. See, it's on there.
Check that book out if you haven't had a chance, listeners.
Self-admittedly, I am not a fan of short stories.
Not your genre.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't like. I'll even go. I don't really like watching movies because everything's so short and condensed, and it's you have 2 hours to tell this grandiose story, so you got to jam it all in there. And so I'm much more of a series kind of person, or a long book form and different things. But so I'll be honest with you. Not begrudgingly, but I picked it up and I kind of read the, different things, and I've been asking, I forgot that Tony had it, cause I tried to get it. And when I went to get it at one point, I couldn't. But I read the summaries on the back or whatever about kind of what it is and some of the things. And I'm like, okay, like we'll get in, like we'll see what's up. And I noticed like each story is only like 10 pages long or so.
Yeah.
But I read the first one, and then the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one, and next thing I know, I hadn't gotten up and I'm halfway through the book. And I realized that sometimes, at least this was kind of my first takeaway from it, was, sometimes a book or a collection of things maybe necessarily isn't about the story or the narrative from beginning to end, but the not only the emotions, but the thoughts and everything it can elicit and pull out of somebody that you don't really realize you're going to have. And I was kind of blown away that you do so well in such a short little, tiny little snippet of a story of being able to, at least for me, being able to pull something out, thoughts and history and, my own past and different things, and make you think about stuff that you never would have expected to just reading a book. And so I think, that where, like you mentioned, the, not spelling it out and giving the, the reader or the listener that little bit of a room to, kind of have to fill in their own blanks was, impressively done. And I'm not doing it any justice, but it's,
you're more than doing it justice. Yeah. Fred, thank you. Robert Frost has this famous saying that no one really knows what he meant. So it's just fun to sit around and guess. But he says, if you've written a book of 10 poems, then you've written a book of 11 poems. And so everyone sits around and, what is the 11th poem? If you have an album of 10 songs, what is the 11th song? And I love how you said that, Fred. I think for me, the 11th poem or the 11th song is what the reader brings to it, right? What connections the reader is making, or what is, I've been thinking a lot about this word evoke. I heard a lecturer say that in Greek, it comes from the word evokai, which means to summon forth, right? And so it was used, it was a theater term. Like if you were an actor and I was a director in ancient Greece and I wanted to summon you forth onto stage, I would evokai you. But it was also like this supernatural term where like a ghost could be evoked from another world. And man, to me, that's the magic of a song or a story, right? Is, I'm not Zach Bryant, but when he sings in Godspeed, only God and my mama know what I need. Dude pulls a ghost from my chest. He evokes my God and my mom and those tensions and everything that entails. And so, man, I appreciate you saying that. I hope it evokes something useful. There's a sense in which we go to songs to learn about ourselves, right? We go to stories to see something afresh. So I hope it did that for you in any case.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I was thoroughly impressed because when I walked, when I was able to finally put it down because I had something I had to go do, I intended to read it, and I didn't think it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be good. After meeting you, I'm like, you know what, if this guy writes a book, like it's going to be good, but there's, you can sit down and, listen to a good song, or you can sit down and watch a good movie and go, yeah, that was good. But it's something different when you get done reading it, or you get done watching it, or you get done listening to a song, and the very last thing you're thinking about is what the song was about or what the movie was actually about. And it's that human connection. It evokes, I think that's a perfect word. And it was that thoroughly impressed me. And later I didn't even realize it until probably an hour or two later when I was still thinking about, those, how those characters are brought forth and it didn't have anything to do with the characters, but it was that interconnection with the families and everything else. It was just like, oh, wow. Like it's just good.
Well,
yeah. So, I mean, like I like Tony said, I suggested, I don't know, while we're on the topic, is it still, where can people get that? Is it still in print? Like, can they get the hardcover? Do you have it on like Kindle or anything like that? Or,
I think there should be copies on Amazon. I think Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, all these major retailers that have the online shops. The publisher is University of North Georgia. So I know you can go directly to them and order off their website. Yeah, I don't know. So you said you tried to get it, but you couldn't.
It was a while ago. So it wasn't recent.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a while ago. I tried to get it when, Tony had told me that it was coming out. So I looked for it and I couldn't remember if I tried to find it on Amazon. It wasn't available at that time, or I couldn't get the actual, whatever it was. But maybe I'll have to check again. Cause I think it's a good one I think it'd be a good one to have on the shelf to be able to pull off, cause I've read a lot of books before and but there's something special about a book that you can pull off the shelf to read again, because you're not reading the book to read the book. You're reading the book to figure out what it's going to give you that day. And
that's good, man.
I think that's a special thing you have there. So, I'll make sure to put that in the show notes and everything else, but
thank you, brother. Phenomenal. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I don't mean, I'm not, I didn't have you on here just to tell you how awesome you were.
No,
I mean, when you're awesome, Dan. What do you want me to say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you guys know this, as songwriters and as musicians. I mean, you put a message in a bottle and you fling it out into the ocean, and it's, there can be a sense, especially in a time like a pandemic, where you're probably more in your head than normal. You're probably less active than normal. You wonder where those bottles go. You wonder if anyone ever gets the messages. And so, man, I can't tell you how much it means to hear that. And you guys were saying, I mean, this is such a cool thing to to hear back from people who have followed Chronic Curiosity, and they're not just following individual episodes and discussions, but they're tracking threads. They're tracking themes, they're tracking repetitions, and that's what it's all about, man. Someone finds the bottle and they got the message, and then they care to let you know, I got the message. Whereas with anything, most people who get the message never really let you know. So you're left to wonder, am I writing into a vacuum? Is the sea even carrying these things out? So man, that's thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And on that note, and I think it's even a lot of times, I think the conversations that you've had, Tony, with people and myself, it's not even, a lot of times we'll have, this show, we don't have rules. We don't really have a whole lot of, there's no script. It's just, there's no questions. I'm not, I have a couple of things that in my mind, I'm like, I want to ask this person about this. But other than that, it's just mostly just ridiculous, just conversation, or, let it go where it goes.
Sure.
But occasionally there's like a message in a bottle, in a sense that, hey, we want to throw it out there. And most of the time, at least what I've found, is typically the message in the bottle is not the message they got, but it's whatever they, it's in between the lines that people have got.
Yeah.
I know you've had conversations with a bunch of people.
Yeah, patience and friends. And for me, like, good art for me is you've created something that's alive. That's good art. And everything that, we created this podcast, your book, like it's alive. Like, it keeps on going.
Yeah.
It keeps on going. And so, art that's alive for me is good art. Not that I'm saying there's bad art, but there's better art. And
there's some bad art out there. Or there's some things that people call art that's, you just dumped a paint can on the floor. Let's knock it off.
Yeah, like, no, for me though, just what Fred said, all I could think of was that you wrote a book that's living, and that's a tall order. And so, when we try and create songs, we try and create songs that are living. And same with this podcast. And like you said, it's very cool to actually get some feedback on someone that enjoyed it, or, it elicited an emotion, or it, evoked something from them. And hey, I'm doing something cool here. I'm creating something that's, coming alive and touching people in some way.
Yeah, well, it's, man, I love that definition of art as something alive. It is touching people, and it, as I'm sure you guys know, most people, at least, I don't know, middle class folks who have jobs and bills to pay and are sort of trying to survive. They don't. It's still a rare thing for them to listen to a good podcast or hear a good song or read a short story. Our world and the pace of the world really isn't built to accommodate that. I try to tell my students, this may be the last time that you sit in a room and talk about sentences. This may be the last time that you look someone else in the eye and try to figure out what C.S. Lewis means by this argument. Because as we know, on the other side of education, the world doesn't care about that. The world's almost invested in the opposite. It's almost invested in, as we talked about earlier, non-thought, and non-critique, and work and consume and hustle, and don't make space for these things. Don't build an interior life. Just buy. So man, I meant what I said when I said you guys are doing a great work, and it's going out in a way that books can't. I envy any art that can go out in audio form, because it can it can meet people on a jog or a car ride, or if your work allows it, in a good pair of headphones, and it can build something that this other world can't touch.
Audiobooks, man. You could read your own book. I'd listen to your sweet dulcet tones in my ears.
Hey, man.
Sweet dulcet tones.
I still don't know if I'm using
funny.
that properly, but I like it, so I'm going to keep on saying.
I'm a huge fan of the audiobook, man. And University of North Georgia Press contacted me about 4 months ago. They're making Floods and Fires into an audiobook. It's funny you should say that, man.
Are you going to read it yourself?
I'm not.
Oh,
No,
that's a bummer.
dude, they are such a phenomenal advocate. They've really pushed the book in some cool ways, and in terms of creative control, they were super respectful. I got say on the cover. I got say on like the ordering of the stories, and even down to like sentence level decisions. They were super supportive. But they just contacted me out of the blue, and they said, "Hey, we're going to make it into a book, and expect to hear from the reader in several days." And he's a great reader. He's done many audiobooks. He's an actor. I had to go on his. I wasn't immediately familiar with him based on the name, but I went on his website, and he's been in some stuff recently. And he's got a really good voice. I think he's going to do the book justice.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Awesome,
Do you know when a time frame or anything like that for it, or?
They don't tell me this, man. They don't. Yeah, there's a proportional relationship with like their sweetness and their support, and then their communication skills. They are awesome advocates, but they're not detail oriented, I guess.
Yeah. Well, they can't give you all the details. Well, let us keep
Keep us
Tony
posted,
apprised.
man.
Yeah, let us know. We'll make sure to shamelessly plug it.
Yeah.
for everybody.
Besides that, man, what are you working on now? Any more short stories? You got some novels going on, songs? What, artistically, what are you doing?
Yeah, man. So I'm doing a screenplay right now.
Okay.
Which is not it does not play to my strengths as a writer. The reason I love songs so much, the reason I love the short story is it is a very compressed form. It's a short space, which frees you up to think about like sounds and syntax and rhythm. And obviously that's what you're thinking about when you write a song. Screenplays have a little bit of that, but you're much more thinking about how things are represented on the screen and how quickly things are moving and dramatic action and character development, really things that I'm sort of underdeveloped in. But it was one of these things. It was too good of an opportunity to pass on. I met a guy in my graduate program named Dean Bakopoulos.
Is that the HBO guy?
It's the HBO guy. Yeah, and he took a short story that I had written, a really weird piece in which a rapture occurs that takes only men. So it's like an all-female world. And he said, man, if you would at all be inclined to turning this into a screenplay, I think I could sell it. And he's a pretty big deal. I mean, he works for HBO. He's sort of like he has a teaching position in Iowa, but then also like flies out to LA and kind of goes back and forth between those worlds. And I didn't want to do it at all because I know almost nothing about screenwriting. I love television. I think it's a really cool medium. I think some of the best stories are getting told, especially on like streaming services.
Yeah.
But I felt that I would regret it if I didn't seize the opportunity. So
put yourself in that uncomfortable zone.
In the end, yeah. Which, man, I love how you put that earlier, Fred. There's something about life. Life has this cruel but also magical quality of like the places you need to go are the ones that you don't really want to go. You're not really equipped to go there, but you need to step into it. And so I'm working on that with Dean, and I'm writing some weird stuff, some essays and some prose poems. Taking a little break from short fiction after about 5 years of churning those out.
So speaking on that, so we've talked about fires and floods. What else do you have out there that people can check out? And what do you, obviously anything that's coming up shortly that you know about that's going to be out for consumption or?
Yeah. I recently sold a story to a really good literary journal out of Denver. They're called Copper Nickel. And it was the wildest thing, man. Usually I write very slowly. I mean, this goes back to our conversation about being compulsive, right? And just dwelling on a word or a phrase and is this a cliche? In what ways is this cliche? In what ways could it have more teeth? And so usually I'm a very slow writer, but I wrote a prose poem all in one morning about getting these yellow jackets out of a trash can. These yellow jackets had built this massive colony in a vintage steel trash can that my wife wanted to, like, she's an artist, and so she wanted to refurbish it or use it for some art project. And she said, "You got to get those things out." And
that's a tall
Tony,
task. I feel like
yeah,
he's just
man.
like he is me. Like when I bought the house that we're in right now, I had a trash can out back that was like, people use that as like a burn barrel, giant nest in it. That's not fun. So sorry. Continue.
Well, no, and I mean, you guys seem pretty tough. I mean, that would probably come as a welcome challenge. I'm a house puppy. You know what I mean? I'm like that's a and so the poem is about, like, you have this problem on your hands, and for me at least, like, I don't want to ask the internet. I have this weird Luddite instinct of, like, not wanting to Google things, and so I just asked people, like, "Hey, what would you do?" And
that could be a bad road to go down.
Well, it's you get all these varied responses. I think I still have the responses with the correct parties. But my dad's thing was they sleep in the evening, they sleep at night. So just wait until they're asleep and slam the lid on and duct tape it and take it out of the country and make it someone else's problem. To which my wife replied, "No, I want the trash can." My brother was like, "Just douse it in gasoline and throw in a match." And again, she's like, "No, you'll damage the trash can." And so it ended up becoming, which should have been like a weekend ordeal, it ended up becoming like this month-long thing, and the colony kept getting bigger. And my kids would get stung if they went by it. And also this weird thing happened where, when you're going to kill a thing, and I don't know if you guys hunt or if you just swat flies out of the air, whatever you're killing, the longer you think about it and the longer you sort of hold it in your mind, the more sentient it seems, right? And so it's a poem called Wasp Queen, and it's just about, it's a page long, but it's about me leading up to having to exterminate these wasps. And so I think that's coming out in the spring. But I always tell people, just Google. If you just Dan Leach writer, I got stuff that
you have a bunch of poems out there too, don't you?
Oh, poems, short stories, book reviews. I mean, it's not all good, but it's out there.
That story,
I spilled a can of paint, man. It's running.
Yeah, right. Well, that story had a very. Did you ever hear, what was that? There's like a little ditty or whatever. These little kids where it was. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza. Seemed like it seemed like your wife was very Eliza in that. She's like, "No, you can't do that. Well, fix it. Just fix it, Henry. I don't know. Just fix it." Like, no, don't do it that way. Like, you got to fix it, but you can't do it that way. No, you can't do it that way either. I'll have to check that out. That sounds like quite an experience.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Let me flip the question back. Obviously the podcast? What else have you guys been making or thinking about or tinkering with?
Oh, Tony, you have a whole slew of things that you've been. I mean, well, you actually tinkering with a job now. So
the job's putting a damper on that. So, for me, man, it's other jobs to create. So as long as I'm creating, I feel like I'm living. Whether it be songs, whether it be this podcast, whether it be even like you said, a conversation at the bar. You were talking about that, and I felt like some of those things that were new for you that I've always been doing in terms of just meeting random people and just having these different conversations. But I think business for me, I'm not sure exactly where that next business venture is going to go, but I have an idea. And then I've been talking to Fred about getting back into some music. So I've got a few lyrics that I've been working on. I don't really tell Fred about them until they're complete, because then he'll be like, "Dude, it's 3/4 done. What are you doing here?" And I'm like, I'll
start picking it up. I'm like, let's play. And then it never finished it.
But I do want to do some more music. I've still been playing some guitar.
He's actually gotten fairly decent.
I don't know about fairly decent.
I didn't say you were good. I said fairly decent.
Okay. I appreciate that backhanded compliment, Fred. It still sucked, but
no, I
not as bad as sucking.
But yeah, you've polished it off a little bit. It's getting better. Yeah.
So, but yeah, just this podcast, man, it's very near and dear to Fred's heart,
Good.
and mine. I'm kind of a let's throw it out there and see what happens. And Fred's been just an absolute beast, man, at just bringing everything together. He was kind of like, hey, I'll figure the audio stuff out.
Except for today, the
The
technology
studio, no, it's
has
fine,
evaded
man.
me today.
That's 2020, man. What do you
Yeah.
expect? And then he was like, hey, I know you know a lot of people, so could you get some guests? And that's been fun for me too, to kind of reconnect with some different people. And I'm like, hey, you want to do this podcast? And they're like, well, what's that about? And I'm like, it's whatever you want it to be about.
Yeah.
Like,
There's no rules here.
Yeah, there's no no laws with chronic curiosity.
Yeah.
But no, that it's been fun, man, to reconnect with people. And then I keep getting this, like, I don't know why, man, but just quantum physics, like string theory, just pops in my head with everything that's been said, man. Just this interconnected of like everything we do, and even your problem, man, about the yellow jackets. I was like, man, that's life right there. About the yellow jackets, about a problem that you need to deal with. You don't know how to solve the issue. All these people give you their opinions on it, and you haven't solved it yet, and it keeps growing, but it keeps affecting you and other people at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to read that poem for sure.
Yeah, I'll bet.
That sounds very Dan Leach-esque for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and normally I would hear that and be like, okay, it's a poem about wasps. Okay, I get it. But like I said, after reading, half of Fire and Floods, it's I'm excited. You have a very particular way of telling a story that, elicits things that you would never expect. So that's it's like the mystery of, I'm going to read these words that they're nothing, there's no stories they're not super crazy stories about super crazy people or anything like that, but they're real life, stories. I'm sure that, I don't know how real life they are, but they're stories that you could very well see happen. But the way they're told is just,
I think that goes back to creating living art, man.
Yeah,
like
it
that's
is.
it right there.
It's just those tiny little tweaks and the things that make your brain just explode and go, well, why is this like, it's kind of like not quite, because these are a little too loose, but like those pictures, at least I remember seeing them as a kid, where it was like all the dots and stuff all over the page, and then you had to hold them just right, and you had to like look at them and like cross your eyes and stuff.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the picture's just like, boom, there it is. Like, and that's kind of the way it is. You're like, all right, I'm seeing the colors, I'm seeing the designs, I'm seeing the boxes. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, never saw that coming. It's just super neat.
Yeah. But I love that for the podcast, you guys you're pursuing that, but you're doing it in a, you show up, you roll tape, you have someone on, but what takes shape was not scripted.
Nope.
And I think I got a theory on why people are so enamored with podcasts. I mean, obviously some of it tracks with like the smartphone, and more access to technology. I
That's
mean,
true.
some of it rises on that tide of like other apps and other softwares. But I got this theory that podcasts remind us of how we used to make conversation.
Yeah.
Right? They almost in the way, like, and you guys are music lovers, so you remember when like Nirvana and Pearl Jam hit in the early 90s, and like the reason it hit so hard is because we'd been under this hair metal pop crap for so long, and it sort of reminded us like, oh yeah, back in the 70s rock used to be like in drop D tuning, right? It used to be just really dark and
Some
visceral.
grungy kids in their garage. Just
Yeah, it was new, but it was old. And I think, like, I look at talk shows from the 70s, like Dick Cavett would have, I don't know, James Baldwin, right, or Norman Mailer on, and they would have these open conversations where people could improvise or could go anywhere, but the shape that it took was something really interesting and useful. And we somehow got away from that into this ultra polished, ultra scripted, mostly marketing. You know, you look at most talk shows and it's, I mean, the reason the guest is on the show is to like promote something, and the reason the host exists is to like flatter them and like help point towards this product.
I'm
And
not
then
doing that with your
podcast,
book, by the way. That wasn't the
no,
intention at
no,
all.
no, but it's like what you guys are doing, and what I explain this to people. Men seem to get Joe Rogan a little bit better than I don't make generalizations often, but I have to explain constantly to some of my female friends, female students, the appeal of Joe Rogan.
Mhm.
And I say, look, go watch an episode of Jimmy Fallon, and then watch the same. You know, if that's 15 minutes, listen to how he talks, listen to the conversation, look at what takes shape there, and then go listen to Joe Rogan and tell me what you notice, right? And I think at least one of the things you notice is that there's a versatility, right? There's a freedom, and it's a conversation with Joe Rogan is jazz, whereas a conversation with Jimmy Fallon is the pop song.
Constructed and constrained and
Constructed, yeah. So I love that you guys are doing this, man. It's anything can happen. You show up and anything can happen.
yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, obviously.
Yeah.
Tony's been putting a rear naked choke at one point,
True.
unbeknownst to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's, I mean, going back to your question about what 2020 is, you know, and everything for us, you know, one of our guests, Becky Kirian, had posted, and I'd seen on her social media that she had kind of posted like, hey, like, you know, through this year, what's something that, you know, has impacted, you know, folks, and, you know, what have you done or learned or this, that, whatever. And, you know, this year it's been weird because I have a lot of sympathy and empathy in different regions for people that are going through struggles and, you know, battling things. And there's just so much to even attempt to unpack what 2020 is. But I said, I mentioned to her, I said, you know what? I said, without the events of this year, the podcast, which she had been a part of at that point, probably wouldn't be a thing. We started out normal year, and I'm very, as much as my wife would say that I'm just kind of whatever, I have found that I like, you know, designation in my days and, you know, certain construction around that. But I realize that I tend to thrive in chaos. When I'm forced to, I'd like having the same schedule. I don't like, you know, being put in weird situations or especially social situations, but I tend to thrive when I'm pushed. You know, and this year I started getting bored because we were locked down, started working from home. I wasn't, you know, out as much. And the one day, I don't know what it was, I realized that the stock market was just in the tanks. And I had for years wanted to kind of learn about, you know, a free market and the stock markets and things. And it was just like, and there wasn't that spark there for me to be interested for a certain reason.
Yeah.
Well, then I thought about it and was like, well, it's got to go up. I was like, you know what? Why don't I'm going to invest in the stock market because I got this extra time in my hands. So I'm going to start learning about it. And so I took a real deep dive into that. And then I did that. And then I took deep dives into all these different things where and then I realized the podcast thing, you know, we talked about on the podcast too, where Tony had tried to listen to, you know, check out Rogan. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But I was already primed for it because I had spent the last 12 years, I spent a lot of time in a truck, just driving around doing things and working out in the field. And I had stopped listening to the radio, probably 8 years ago.
Sure.
Because it's just the same music, the same crap over and over and over. And then especially once you start discovering artists that are really good, you can't listen to, you know, any pop station or, you know, country station or rock station because it's the same 5 songs every hour. And it was, so I was listening to a local radio show that, you know, they were ridiculous, but it was something different every day. And it was, when I'm sitting in my truck all day long, it was kind of like a companionship there in a sense, you know, that because I didn't get to talk to anybody. So it was that. And then I started listening to a little bit of Rogan, some different things. And Jordan Peterson was one of the people that kind of sparked that, you know, starting to go search for new people. And we've talked about before in the podcast where Peterson can be very controversial, but one thing is that he does do is he's very articulate and he explains what he thinks very well. Whether you agree with him or not, if you give him enough time to talk, he explains where he's coming from well. So him, and then to the Rogan, and I started listening to, you know, the Weinsteins. Eric and Brett Weinstein were extremely intelligent people. I'm like, I don't understand what half they're saying half the time, but you know what? They're fun to listen to. When I do understand something that they say, I'm like, it's like a little victory. Like, yay! Like I learned something today. But I don't know exactly where I was going with all that. But you know, 2020 for me has been extremely beneficial, at least mentally and personally, because I have had time to kind of, you know, think about, you know, what does this life mean to me? You know, all these things that we're doing, why are we doing them? You know, what are we doing them for? And what, if I'm not doing something that's going to benefit me in some way, shape, or form, then why am I doing it? So, you know, I think it's, a lot of people have said that, excuse me, that, you know, 2020 is, you know, made them realize that their family was important or this was important. And to me, it just made me realize that we're all important. But we have to make ourselves important.
Yeah.
Because you go through life thinking you're worthless and just treating your life like it's worthless. Well, guess what? It's going to be worthless. So do something with it if you want to, but if not, get it out of my way and don't, you know what I mean? Don't slow me down because I got stuff I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm only here for, you know, 70 years, 80 years. I don't know, maybe 60, maybe 35. And I'll be out of here next year. I have no idea, but I guess it was one of those things where like, I'm tired of doing the grind, just going to work, being a good little soldier ant.
Yeah.
Like you got to find that some kind of purpose in life to be able to make it worth it, you know? And it seems, I mean, and we've talked about it before too, like, the Naval Ravikant quote, you know, or not the quote,
Confucius,
but he quoted, you know, Confucius that we were talking about the one time that, you know, was that every man has two lives and the second one begins when he realizes he only has one. And to me, it seems like Dan's been doing that for a while. I don't know. He seems wise beyond his years.
He's from the South, bro. Who knows?
I just have you fooled is all.
Oh, well, you're good at it.
Fred,
you tricked us, Chief.
That's right, man. I love what you're talking about. We focus a lot on the possibilities shut down, like the freedom shut down, the capacities that were like closed by the pandemic. But I don't think we talk enough about like the possibilities that were opened up, which is what sounds like happened to you. Tony and I have this writer that we both love named Ron Rash. He's a North Carolina guy. I think he's probably like our best living guy. I think he's, I don't know, the closest thing we have to a Faulkner, but he has this quote. He says, "Violence pulls back the veneer of everyday manners, and then you get to see what's under." And I think, like, I've been thinking about that in connection with the pandemic. I mean, it is a form of violence, right? It is a form of, it brings death and it brings limitation. And even things, I mean, if we're going to be flexible with what violence is, I mean, making someone wear a mask or making someone stay home or, you know, limiting someone's ability to move. I mean, these are all forms of violence. And we can certainly cry foul about how bad it hurts, and it does in certain ways. But Fred, I love what you're saying about it also opens up new capacities. Like it peels back this veneer of manners and of complacency and of not thinking about how short life is. And it wakes you up. It wakes you up to how the wolves are at the door. If you're gonna make a podcast, get busy. If you're gonna write a book, write a song, ask someone to marry you, move to a new city, whatever it is. What is the Shawshank Redemption? The
Get
famous
busy
line.
living or get busy dying, bro.
Amen, amen. I used to watch that movie with my dad late at night, man. So many of those lines resonate with me. But yeah, man, it's opened up some urgencies, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just so much that just, hey, we're here. You don't get a choice. I mean, within reason, you're going to be here. So why not make the best of it? It was funny. Kind of made me think of the other day. I saw one of my buddies, and it was like a Thursday or something like that, and we worked together. And he was like, "What's your deal today?" Because I was just in a good mood, and he was like, "Are you just like?" He's like, "Are you just on like the fuck it train today? Like, because you just seem like you're just like whatever." And I was like, "Well," I was like, "Kind of," but I said, "You know what?" I said, "I woke up." I said, "I wasn't particularly in a good mood. Just didn't want to do the things I had to do today, and then I did what I tell myself and other people to do when they start bitching about something. I'm like, if you got to do it, you got to do it. You're here. This is the day it is today. It's being grumpy about it's not going to change anything. So I'm going to be in a good mood. Why not? Like, I have a much better time when I'm in a good mood. So, and it just kind of like clicked with me. It was like continually this year, like you said, it's opened up so much to go, hey, this is it. This is your chance. Yeah. And guess what? Tomorrow morning when you wake up, that's your chance again. And then you wake up the next day, you got another chance, and I think it's, if you don't think about it like that, you can go down a dark hole. And I think that's one of the biggest things about this year is seeing those, seeing some of the statistics of people that, they've been down those dark holes, and it's crazy to hear some of the stories and some of the darkness that has been 2020. And, I think part of this, we started this out and it was, we're going to do this because we want to. We have a good time doing it, and that's just the reason we're doing it. But, if we can, reach at least one or two people while we're at it, I mean, that's just an added benefit. Is it selfish? I don't know. I'm not sure, but it feels good. So whatever. Like I think that was a conversation we've had before too, where is it selfish to do something that is going to benefit other people because it makes you feel good, but you're still benefiting somebody else?
Yeah, I like to think of both things happening. I mean, you guys are building a bonfire on the beach, right? And you like it because there's cold beer, and you guys are playing guitar, and it's warm, right? But the guy walking down the beach who's cold and lonely, he likes it too because he sees it and he steps into that. And when he does, he's not met with judgment, right? So I like that, man. You guys are building bonfires, and it's beneficial for you. It's a good place for you guys to be, but it's also a sort of light in a dark place for the guy who, Fred, I love your story, but you were on the road for a long time, and on the other end, you had to listen, right? And now you're speaking, and like there's someone else out there listening right now, and you're the one speaking, and it's good, man. It's a good work.
I think that goes back to, man, to something that you and me, we've talked about this in the past. It's like, it's interesting to think about consumption versus production, man. And like, when does that actually happen? And it's very cool to see Fred kind of make that transition of and myself from that consumption to production.
Yeah.
So, and you, man, honestly, like I remember back on Bogard when you were just reading.
Yeah.
And then to actually see you produce something and write something it's awesome, man. Like, I don't think you know how proud I am of, dude, all the things you write, man, of all the things you do. And especially too, kind of being a professor. Now, we had a conversation before, and I believe this was when you were in Nebraska, and you said, man, I get these parents that come up to me and they're like, you've transformed my child. You've transformed my child. Like just by the way you treat them, the way that, you are as a teacher, as a leader. And you told me, you're like, dude, that's good to hear, but that doesn't really like make my soul come alive. And I'm like, whew. I'm like, dude, that is, wow. Like that's a beast right there, man.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you're changing kids' lives, and it's not that you're just flippantly throwing it to the side or anything. You wholeheartedly acknowledge like what that parent's saying, but dude, your soul isn't moved by that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Your soul's moved by creation. And so now, you're back to that. You're back to a professor, someone that, can guide, the impressionability of these souls is there, and you can lead them, but you're also still creating too. So you've kind of figured out a way to, going back to our original, thought about the duality there, that one doesn't have to only exist. Like you figured out how to kind of have both realms exist in your life. So that, I think that's awesome. You've been able to do that.
Oh, thank you, man. Fred was saying something earlier about how in a certain sense the podcast is new territory, but then in another way it was always there. It was always kind of right underneath his nose. He was being primed and being trained without really even being cognizant of the fact that that's what was going on. And I think now about, my job is to sit in rooms and ask people to slow down and look at language and ask people to think. And I realized, like, man, you mentioned Bogart Street, which was, for context, this was a house. Tony and I met our freshman year at College of Charleston. This would have been.
Oh, we got to hear the story.
Yeah,
the T-shirt.
We got it.
I've heard it once already, but I need to hear it again.
This is a tracksuit, bro. It's a sweatshirt
or whatever. So for those that don't know, we've obviously mentioned Dan multiple times, but Tony and Dan know each other way back.
Yeah.
And then I've, like I said, met him. I don't remember if this got caught on the when we started out or not, but I've only met you once in person. We spent 2 or 3 days playing music and whatnot together. But yeah, so continue. But as long as you put in
for sure,
the story of meeting Tony in the T-shirt or the track, whatever it was. Yeah.
Those are two separate stories.
Okay,
good stories in and of themselves.
Yeah, so you can piggyback on it, but I want to hear it again, just for my own indulgence.
Because at first it was only a T-shirt. We lived in the same dorm, but we just kind of passed each other, in the way of the cafeteria. I didn't know him, and Tony, could I correctly categorize you as an introvert? You're an introvert as well, right?
Which was, I accurately categorized me back in the days as an introvert. When you said you were an introvert, I was like, this is 2020, so I'm not sure what dimension we're on. I'm like, you at face value, you are not an introvert, but I understand what you're saying. But yes, so we lived in, it was an all-male dormitory, and it was on George Street in Charleston, South Carolina. And you were my roommate, and we never even, I think we said hi one time. It was you and I guess we can probably say names on here, right? Maybe, I don't know, Rungi.
I don't care.
Yeah, whatever. And so one of your buddies had been trying to get you to come down to the College of Charleston. And so, yes, we were roommates in an all-male dormitory, and we had spoken maybe one time, and that was you lived over here. You lived 10 feet away from me, separated by drywall, and I lived over here, and that was the extent of our relationship at that point.
Yeah. And you had your girlfriend and your routines, man. You lifted weights, and you were pre-med. So you were in a different headspace in terms of what you studied, and I had mine, and we really only sort of like exchanged basic courtesies.
And I was a Yankee, by the way, too.
Yeah, so. Yeah.
And always in a different headspace.
But now, I guess towards the end of that year, we connected on a deeper level, right?
Do you remember the initial kind of No,
Oh,
so I do remember I was off kind of partying, trying to find myself, I guess,
okay.
and I was like, man, this is just empty. Like this isn't fun. Like I'm like you said at the time I was an introvert. Now I feel like I could just walk myself into any party or whatever and have a conversation with whoever, but I just left. Man, I was with someone. I was at a party. You were with one of your female friends and Rungi, and it was a little bit earlier. And I came home and I sat down on the couch and no, actually, you guys were watching a movie. You were watching a movie and you said, "Hey, do you want to join me?" And I said, "No, I'm good." And I just took my introverted self right back into my room while you guys sat out there and laughed and watched a movie. And finally, I don't know what the impetus to this was. Probably just because I was like, man, this is ridiculous. Like I'm in college, I'm sitting in a room by myself. These people are having fun. Like maybe I should just see why they're having fun and who they are. And so we went out there, and I knew that you were pretty involved with church at the time
Yeah,
and things like
yeah.
that. And not that that was a deterrent or anything. I didn't know what that was all about, and so I was a little bit hesitant. And I went out there, and something that stuck with me because I had this idea, this notion. I think that like people that were actively involved with the church didn't really know how to have fun, or they just shunned these secular ideas. And you were like, "Hey, you want to smoke a stogie?" And I was like, "Wait a second." I was like, I don't know how to reconcile the two. Like this dude reads his Bible and he goes to church, but he smokes stogies. Like, is that okay? And I was like, whew, now I definitely have to hang out with him. So it was the invitation of that stogie that I was like, yep, I'm gonna hang out with him. So man, sat down on the couch, ended up going out there. I think we smoked something terrible, probably some Swisher Sweets or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning, man. That was the beginning. And then there was some fitness, some gym things in there, some
Yes.
protein powder, some you eating some cashews at some point that my grandparents sent me. No, man, that was kind of how it began. And I always appreciated the fact, man, this kind of just how friendly you were, man, how personable you were, how accepting you were. And I was like, that's pretty darn cool. And then then we did become friends, and we were very different. And I think that's kind of what piqued my interest, was the fact that we were just so different from one another.
Yeah, man, it like as you were telling that story, it came back to me. Strange as that sounds, I don't know what I was doing with stogies. I've never been like a big
I know,
cigar
I know.
guy. I don't know why I had
I know you're
that
not.
night. But yeah, as you were telling me that, it came back to me. But then the second year we lived together, I mean, it was a different level of friendship.
Yeah.
Because we would just sit around, idea how atypical this was, but we would sit around and like research theological issues or
Yeah.
discuss philosophy. I mean, we just like any night of the week, you'd come in and it was like this weird. It was this old row house in the hood. Really, it was one of the few houses in this little stretch of very rough neighborhood that was
You
fixed
got
up.
mugged the first week we lived there.
What?
Said you got mugged the first week we lived there. You remember
We all
that?
got mugged, man. I know I got mugged. Gibbs got mugged twice and cut once. Tony, you once asked me to jump in a car with you and track down a guy who ripped us off for a couple $100.
Yeah, we tried. We tried. We were gonna try and throw him a beating.
Jeez, man. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I mean, we were getting mugged and we were getting our home broken into, but we were also sitting around. And I guess this is the connection I wanted to make with like how you can be being prepared for something, but you're not really aware of it. Because I don't think I would have told you at the time that I wanted to write or that I wanted to teach. I was undecided.
True.
I was undecided as a major, and just really sort of like avoiding making serious decisions. I was avoiding thinking about that. But you look at what we would do, man, and we would sit around and have these conversations for hours about like these abstract ideas or these theories. and I just thought it was normal. I had no
Yeah.
idea.
That sounds like
that's
a
not what was
great
going
time.
on one block over. But you've always been that way, man. I mean, we'll call each other on the phone, and it's like 30 seconds of pleasantries, and then we're off.
We're in it. Yeah.
Well, he's changed a little bit because he doesn't like to entertain my alien ideas.
Had to slip it in there. We definitely entertained it on the last episode.
We did.
So
We talked about
no, I'm pretty much we entertain all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But there was that element of even on Bogart, man, even in the hood there was that element of just kind of opening up to people. Do you remember we almost had an informal homeless ministry where
Yeah.
like, dude, the homeless community knew who we were, and they kind of, told their buddies or whatever, hey, you want a meal? You need an outfit? Like, you want someone to just go talk to and regard you as a human being, which they absolutely are. They would come to our house, man. We literally had.
I could totally. I'm not even fully. I could see you guys sitting on a front porch of some,
Which is where we were.
Run down
Which is where
road,
we were.
Absolutely.
and then just some homeless guy walking up and like, hey, you want to? Hey, we got some pizza over here.
No, bro.
You want some
we had
pizza?
we
Here you
had
go.
We had a grill, bro. We were a step above.
Yeah, either way,
we had the grill.
I could totally see you guys just sitting down there and just like with one extra chair on the lawn, just like cooking some food. And we're like, hey, we got a chair. You want to?
Yeah.
Let's hang out and talk. And then
Yeah.
just sitting there hanging out with a homeless guy.
Bro, you remember JoJo? Yo, JoJo. This dude would announce himself when he'd come by.
He called Tony Big Bible, and he called me Little Bible. But he had there's a dialect in the Low Country. It's kind of like Gullah in Louisiana, but it's called Geechee, and it sounds Caribbean. It almost sounds like something from like the Dominican Republic or Jamaica. But yeah,
Came up from like
JoJo,
Louisiana or something.
yeah. JoJo would call him. He'd go Big Bible, and he'd call me Little Bible.
It sounded like Boppa almost. Big Boppa, Little Boppa.
We call him Big Bible, Little Bible, because that's what we would. I remember we made these little care packages one time because we weren't trying to give money to people who could, potentially have like substance abuse issues, and so we made these little. We just got like gallon Ziploc bags, and we'd put like a pair of socks, a can of Pringles,
food, toiletries, whatever,
a stick of deodorant, and it was like, how can I pray for you? What's going on? Trying to talk
So you
to
guys
people
were
in a human way, as opposed.
You guys were like the subscription boxes before the subscription boxes were cool.
Yeah.
kind of, I guess.
Well, I'll tell you, man. I shared a story. Let's see if you remember this one. So we had our homeless thing, but do you remember we were sitting around one Friday night and we just decided off the cuff to go down to there was a battered women's shelter around the way from our house, and we called them, just cold called them, and said, what could we do to like help you out? What could we do like now to help you out? And they said, the food here sucks. And the dessert is the worst of all. They never get ice cream, and they always ask for ice cream. And Tony, you remember we ran to that Harris Teeter and we got just gallons of ice cream and toppings, and we just showed up to this battered women's shelter and like started serving out ice cream to these women who, they're straight out of an Isbell song, right? You just look at their face and it's, they needed a lot more than a bowl of ice cream.
Yeah. But that was the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. But you see, I don't know, you look at where you ended up, and do you see that as a form of preparation, or maybe like some early smoke signals that you were going to end up dealing with people whose lives had been derailed and dealing with people who maybe needed a kindness that wasn't available in the mainstream?
Yeah, definitely to an extent, man. Like you said, man, I deal with that now, but I think there's always that level of familiarity where I could see a portion of myself, because at times, man, my own life was derailed. And so, yes, there was that level of preparation, but there was that level of cognizance of my own life, and you combine the two, and then you're able to build this awesome rapport with these people. And I've always said that could be me easily. That could be me. And so who would I want on the other side speaking to me or helping me? And so, it definitely helped.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think there was that level of preparation. You kind of think back and you're like, man, was that something divine? Was that, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, or was it kind of like the I don't know, this isn't the great analogy, but the chicken or the egg kind of deal where,
Sure.
maybe that's why you're so good at what you do, because you've had that, interaction and preparation as it were beforehand, that
Yeah.
you find that field to just be so accommodating to your skills.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too, man, is something that you always go back to. I just like characters.
Yeah.
Like, I genuinely enjoy characters, and I think everyone in this room is a character. They're interesting. They're very atypical. I just thoroughly enjoy characters, and I tell my patients that. They tell me the wildest stories ever about going to jail, or about people. I have a guy, man, that lost. It's a terrible story, but it's life, man. Like, it deals with death and, losing 2 sons, a wife, and a sister in 18 months. Like, you don't get much more real than that. And so it keeps me so grounded, man, and it keeps me so appreciative and so, able to be perceptive and realize, the things that I have, and relativism and all those things. Like, those are huge for me, man. And then I take these stories and I'm able to kind of pass them on and look at things into better perspectives, and so it makes me a better provider, and I think a better human being too, man. Even a better father, and all those things. So I think it's kind of how you perceive things, but yeah, absolutely going back to the past and everything I've gone through, and I think that even goes back to kind of what I was saying when I get this weird idea about the overall title of this conversation or whatever, man, with string theory, about how connected weird things are and how you can't explain them.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I think that's something too that I can connect with is, growing up, I always thought that, maybe I didn't have, the greatest this, that, whatever. But, being able to connect to people that are just like me and you and everybody else that has this horrific story, and they're just people. We're just people, and to be able to, I think there's, as weird as it is, weird as it is to say, to be able to see someone that has a story that's much, much worse off than you are. Yeah. If you don't get some kind of appreciation out of that, like, to be able to understand that and to be able to use that, and to say, what, my life's pretty darn good. This is going really well. And why not give some of that back and try to, connect with somebody that way?
Dude, not to stop you. Hold on.
It's hard.
We're frozen. Are we still recording audio wise?
Yeah, we're still recording audio.
Okay.
Yeah, the audio still is good, and he's still coming through. Is our video frozen on your end?
You are, but it's the perfect shot to be frozen on. Tony looks
like my eyes are closed.
Fred looks very deep in thought. So, I mean, in a conversation that's been so concerned with, I don't know, self-reflection and deep things. I think this is what you'd want to be frozen on.
Yeah, usually people have their mouths open, with one eyeball. We still got you loud and clear, Dan. So I mean, we'll just whatever. The video's been terrible. Yeah, we see you perfect. Ooh. So we can still see that glorious mustache.
That's right, man.
Everything. So
well, let's roll with it. I mean, I guess what I love, because I think it's one of the most humbling experiences I know of, is when you've already sort of assigned a story to someone, and whether you've come up with this story based on past experience or based on things you've heard or based on things you're observing, but you too quickly and you maybe too arrogantly say, I got your number. I know. Yeah, I know where you're from. I'm reading the clues here. I know what your story is. And then when you stop to listen, and everything about their actual story just subverts what you had assumed, and you realize that's the problem with assumptions, is they're never going to be in line with what's really going on with someone, where someone has really been and what they've been through, and Yeah, man. I guess that's always been there. I guess we've always had a heart for the characters.
Yeah, and I guess you know we've talked about you being a professor as well. I think a big piece of that is, you know, how do we pass that along?
Yeah.
You know, because one of my biggest regrets in my life is the fact that I haven't gotten to the point that I am, you know, whether it be socially or, you know, and some people would still disagree that, you know, maybe I'm not where I should be, but how, you know, how can we try to, you know, kind of pass that forward to younger generations and, you know, our kids and those things appropriately to, to be able to facilitate that open and honest conversation and getting to know people and, you know, and understanding them and not, you know, judging that book by its cover, to use a, you know, old one. But at the same time, you know, just it being realistic, because sometimes I feel like, you know, being too, and I don't want to use the word liberal. I want to use the word liberal as in the pure definition,
Sure.
not as it's used today,
Yeah.
since we're talking about words. But, you know, because how do we do that without being too forgiving and too liberal with other people's actions and everything else too? Because, you know, at some point, like, you got to be nice to people and you got to, but sometimes that niceness can somehow do a whole 180, and being so nice turns into being walked all over.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I think,
absolutely.
yeah. So how do you do that with what you do professionally and try to, you know, with your, not only with your students, but you're a father of many,
Yeah.
you know, and even more so, you know, with the kids at school too. So like, how do you see that?
Yeah, I don't know. Christ was talking to his disciples once. He said, I need you to be shrewd as serpents, but gentle as doves." Right? And it's that tension of um, knowing that any given person telling you something could be absolutely full of shit, right? Or even more sinister, they could be manipulating you, or they could be trying to uh, hurt you in some way, right? And that's the shrewdest serpents. I mean, you have to acknowledge that as a reality, but then you also have to be as gentle as a dove in your assumptions and in the way that you listen. And I don't, man, my wife would tell you I can't read a room to save my life, so I tend just as a rule of thumb to like lean towards the gentleness, which has gotten me in trouble. I mean, I've been gentle where shrewdness would have been the better play, or I've been trusting where a little bit of discernment and distancing would have protected me. But we have to. I feel like this is going back to something we talked about earlier. The opposite of reduction is complexity, right? Is maybe we maybe even say
Mhm.
paradox or contradiction, and we have to hold that contradiction in mind, where it's like I am going to go out and make myself vulnerable, and that is stupid, because there are people who will seize upon that vulnerability to like hurt me, and yet I'm going to do it, and I'm also going to protect myself, and that's stupid, because by protecting myself, I'm necessarily shutting people out, but I have to be ready to do either in this weird sort of contradiction. I have to train my brain to be both shrewd and gentle, both judgmental, and I'm using that term um, in the Hebrew sense of the word. It just means to draw a line, right? It doesn't mean to condescend or to hate or to wish ill. It just means you got to judge. You got to draw a line and say, this guy I can trust, this guy I can't, or this I believe, this I don't believe. So you have to make some judgments, but then you also have to be humble enough to say, my judgments aren't, they may be worth nothing. I could be dead wrong on everything. And if someone has a different judgment than me, can I at least listen to it? And can I be open to the possibility? That's something I say a lot of times. I teach students who are so sure of their own convictions. And I just say, can I invite you? Can I just invite you to this possibility? Could you just be open to the possibility that this other view different as it may seem, is also valid, or could complicate your view in an interesting way. And I don't think we're trained to think like that at all. I think back to our original point, I think we're trained in, how do I reduce both fact and feeling into something that serves me, into something that's like a utility for like my own goals. And so that's the best I got, man. I don't know that I hope some of that sinks in with my students. I know that I'm the last person who should be preaching it, because I constantly, am too shrewd and too judgmental, and then I'm also too generous and too trusting, and I've both of those proclivities have gotten me in trouble over time. But I'm trying constantly to live in that tension and say, what does this moment need? What does this person need? So that's it, man. That's my formula.
Sounds a lot like divergent thinking, Tony.
I do like that.
He always brings up.
Well,
No,
tell me more about that. I don't know much about divergent thinking.
Oh, I mean, I think you're doing it, man. And so for me, it goes like just not being in a box, man.
Yeah.
It's an even education going, hey, you have to solve this math problem in this particular way. Like, I think that stymies that creativity and who kids could be.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
by keeping them in that box, man, like, how do we know that there's not, like, you just shut down another Einstein, you shut down another Nikola Tesla, like, because you didn't let them solve a math problem the way that they otherwise would have done it, which created something else, and they would have gone, oh, boom, this lit up in my brain, like, now I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this in literature. I'm going to do this in science. I'm going to do this in health, whatever. So I don't know, man. I love that divergent thing, because I think you've always kind of been a divergent thinker, man, which was what drew me to you. I'm like, this guy's kind of an aberration. Like, you don't meet a lot of that human being. And I think I'm that same way. Like, I don't, ceilings are fine if it's raining, but like I don't
like that.
I don't,
Ceilings
that
are
a
fine if
lot.
it's raining.
like I don't want that ceiling, man. Like, I want to keep going. So, and I think that and this is probably going to be this will be a conversation with I don't know who she is, but I know she has an idea on the paradigm of education. But I think too, man, that like ADHD has increased because of that convergent thinking, because we haven't stepped back and gone, maybe kids need to be stimulated in a different way. Like, maybe we need to do something with class size, or do something with the way we introduce a subject. And I'm not saying that is professor's fault or teacher's fault, or even the state's fault for that matter, but it's conversations that, and maybe they've been had, and I wasn't privy to these conversations, or I'm not in education, but I think it just limits people so much, man. And I'm not a limiter. Like, if you have an idea, let's roll with this idea. If you want to take a chance, and hopefully it's a calculated risk, dude, let's go. Let's do it. Let's see what happens at the end of it. It might, end up tremendously terrible. Like, but at the end of it, we can learn from it, and at least we did it. Like, our trip that you and me did for Gulfport, dude, it could have been terrible. Like, I dropped out of college. I called this man right here, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he's like, I'm waiting to go to Clemson." I said, "No, dude, what are you doing with your life?" And I said, "Dude, get in your piece of crap Honda, come down here, pick me up, and we're leaving. We're going." And it could have been absolutely terrible, but it ended up being something amazing, and we didn't stay within that box. I didn't stay at college. You didn't stay home and study or prepare or whatever for Clemson. Dude, we just left, and we just lived, and we got the hell out of that box.
Yeah.
We went, man. And even the journey down, like, every step of that trip was so divergent, man. Like, we didn't take the highway. I had an old school map, which kids don't even know what to do with maps anymore. Hardly anyone does, man. Like, I love maps, man. I love maps. And I said, we're going to take every flipping back road that we can take. And along the way, like, well, dude, what was that field we stopped in? Do you remember that? We stopped in a field.
Southfield.
South field. We stopped in this field because we didn't take the convergent path on the highways that
Yeah.
most people would have taken, because it was more convenient, it was faster, it was easier, and dude, you could pluck the stars out of the sky. You were so close to
Unreal.
them because
Yeah.
it was
Unreal.
dark. There was hours of no other traffic on the road, and I don't know, man. I think we need more divergent thinkers, and I think we need to encourage more divergent thinking.
Yeah, well, and I hadn't heard that term before you shared it. It sounds like a thinking more taken with faith of what could happen as opposed to fear of what might happen. I had a class, I was teaching George Orwell's essay, Shooting an Elephant, right? Which is this great essay about race and about power and about like herd instinct versus like individual conviction. And I thought it would be a home run. I'm like, this is gonna, and it was early in the semester, and my kids, and my I shouldn't call them kids, my students, my young adults at Charleston Southern are great. I mean, they do their reading, they come to class, they're super respectful, zero discipline issues, zero attitude. They make my job very easy, but I couldn't get them to talk. I'd point to a moment in the text and I'd say, what do you think about this? Like, what's working here? What is Orwell asking us to think about or feel? And it was just crickets. And I sort of took off my teacher hat and I was like, yo, this is awkward. Like, what is going? If you didn't read, tell me you didn't read, and like I can click into lecture mode and deliver it, but like this is uncomfortable.
Give me something here. Yeah.
Well, I think is it George Orwell? Isn't he the guy that the Modern Man in Search of the Soul, or is that different?
I don't know.
Orwell
is most people know him from 1984 or Animal Farm. But
maybe I'm thinking of somebody else.
Modern Man
I might be thinking of some.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Huxley, maybe?
No, he was a Swedish philosopher. I think he's early 1900s. Sorry.
Yeah.
Total off track there. I wasn't familiar with the article you're talking about. So I know what I was thinking was the guy is very complex in his writing, and you read it and you go, that means something. I'm just not sure what it is, but it's like, you know what I mean? So I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. Read, Shooting an Elephant. It's a clean read. It's a good read. But they wouldn't talk about it. And I said, can you just be honest with me? Like, why are we so quiet today? And they said, in so many words, about 3 or 4 kids spoke up, and it was, I'm afraid of being wrong. I'm afraid of being inarticulate. I'm afraid that I don't have the definitive meaning, right? Or I guess you were using the term convergent meaning. And I said, listen, what if instead of starting your sentences with, the text is doing this, or Orwell means this, or the meaning of this, instead of that reductive, definitive thinking, what if you just said, one way we might read this, or one thing that's possibly going on here? Like, would that make you more comfortable? And they're like, yeah, that would make me more comfortable. I said, so do it. And it opened up this conversation. Like weeks later, we were talking about Colin Kaepernick, right? Mm. And it was so cool to see students say, one way we might understand this moment is this, or another way to read this moment is this, or one thing we might want to connect this to, or one thing that we could view this moment through is this, as opposed to just saying Colin Kaepernick is fill in the blank. What was going on here is because it's, again, that sort of singular thinking, it's really not something that you can quantify like in an empirical sense, and B, it just divides, right? It just divides into, this side thinks Colin Kaepernick is a crook and a thug, and this side thinks he's a martyr and a hero, and then we're sort of at war, as opposed to just saying, geez, I think a lot's going on in this moment, and it's really interesting to think about how might we think about Colin Kaepernick? How might we think about a way to get down to Gulfport, Mississippi? It opens possibilities instead of shutting them down, right?
Yeah, that's so important. I think, and that's Man, you just blew my
Yeah,
mind.
man.
There's so much to unpack there. I'm a huge proponent of that. And like I said, I can't articulate it properly, but the sharing of ideas,
Yeah.
and it's not, this is what he means or this is what he doesn't mean. And because guess what? He wrote, you talk about George Orwell, and I was thinking about Carl Jung.
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
see, yeah, completely different person. But it's not what he means by the words. I think it goes back to our conversation about the music and the writing. It's, what does this mean to you?
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't write that sentence to mean a specific thing. Maybe he didn't write and I wrote it down, so I'm gonna have to check it out. To shoot an elephant. Is that to shoot an elephant or shooting of an elephant?
Shooting an elephant.
Shooting an elephant. Maybe he didn't write that to mean a specific thing.
Yeah.
Maybe
the 10 poems, and now you've got the 11th one.
Yeah, maybe it was,
Absolutely.
what's the 11th one? What's it mean to you? And I think that's what we've lost is nobody is, not nobody, but so many people these days are so afraid to say, well, have you thought about it like this? Not because I think it originates from, not because they think they're going to be stupid or they think they're going to say something stupid, but the person on the other end that's receiving it is going to lash out at them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's what it is. And I think that's why once again, when we started doing this, it was like, when we started, it was, I think even on one of the podcasts for a couple episodes, I had an intro that was saying, allow us to say some stupid shit.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cause we're just talking. So let us say something stupid and then call me out on it.
Yeah.
So we can discuss it. And so I know why it's stupid. Or you could call me out on something and go, and I go, oh, well, that's not what I meant at all. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just said the wrong word.
Yeah.
There we go. Problem solved. But no one lets people do that anymore. So I think that's a beautiful thing is, be wrong. Please be wrong, because then you can figure out where right is.
Yeah. That's good, man. I heard a pastor say recently that the word patience, like as in most modern translations, the word used to be translated as long suffering, as in like you're willing to,
yeah, that's
willing
really
to
specific
suffer
there.
someone for a long time. And I think we can say we need to be more patient with one another or more sensitive with one another. I think we need to be more long suffering. It's like, yeah, Fred, will you let me say some stupid, wrong-headed things, and will you just suffer them long enough, for us to build a relationship, even if we come out on the other end of the conversation still entrenched in our separate views, like at least we have some credibility with each other, at least we have some history. But will you suffer me? Will you suffer me long enough so that maybe one or both of us could be reoriented through this conversation? And it's hard. I get it. We don't want to suffer views different than ours. We really don't want to suffer. I think what I noticed the most in sort of this right, left, liberal, conservative thing is we're not willing to suffer the dispositions, right? Like there's a disposition that comes with most conservatives where it's very factual and it seems cold to the left, and there's a disposition from the left that seems very wild and passionate, and that's sort of threatening to the right. But we don't want to suffer that. We just want to write them off as like, the evil patriarchy, and then like the radical Marxists. Right. And it's, look, suffering's not fun. But what's the alternative? War?
Yeah, more suffering.
More suffering.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. And to me, like you said, suffer me long enough to at least understand where I'm coming from and why I believe what I believe. I think that's a big factor, that the two things is people aren't willing to try to understand why somebody believes what they believe, and they're not willing to give them the room to explain in their own mind, their legitimacy of what they believe. And then finally, hey, we can still walk away and and disagree.
Yeah.
We can agree to disagree and not hate each other.
Yeah.
Just, but I think that's a hard thing for a lot of people is, well, they have to be right. And I'm one of those people that I'm not good at being wrong. I'm not. But you know what? If you tell me why I'm wrong and you can explain it to me and answer my questions and we can have a conversation and not scream at each other and start throwing insults, and be respectful of each other, I might still walk away and think I'm right, but at least I can respect you enough to have a conversation next time. And I think that's what's really hurting us as humans these days. I don't know how to not, to fix that, especially with, there's so many proponents with social media and, narratives, because you watch the news, depending on what channel you watch, you get a certain narrative. And that's, you go, just politically, you talked about left, right. Everyone has their own narratives,
Sure.
Their story, the other story, and somewhere in between. Like, where do we, how can we come together? I don't know, but it's just sad because it's like so many people spend so much time harboring that hate and anger, and I've been there, and maybe that's why I understand the hate, because I've been there. That's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's so exhausting that in that exhaustion, you may be tempted to pull up a social media site where other exhausted people who share your view offer you what seems like encouragement and validation, which refills you enough to go like,
right.
Yeah. So we are caught up in a very strange cycle. I wonder if the fix is going to happen on a local, like on a provincial level. And what I mean by that, and this is a super isolated example, but I remember when the George Floyd stuff was going on this summer, and it was so like I was between jobs. I was actually between moves. I'd accepted a job down in Charleston, great position, but we were sort of packing up and we were preparing for that move, but we hadn't moved yet. And again, when something like that happens, it's almost like a failure of imagination. We don't want to talk about what might be going on or the various factors. We want to say this is what's going on, and it has always gone on, and it's the blame lies with this person, and both sides kind of construct this really reductive narrative. And I remember trying to process it all. Like everyone else, I'm confronted with these images, and I'm trying to fit it with what I know of our history and with what I know of my experience. And I kind of came to a point where I spent way too much time on my phone for like 3 days in a row. And it when it's like eating junk food for 3 days in a row. You feel it. Like you feel like this is this is not healthy. It's not healthy for my body. Mm-hmm. It's not healthy for my mind. And
I think a lot of people are going through that all year long.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
So and again, forgive me if this sounds like I'm making light of a systemic or historical issue, but I just said, you know what? I have Black friends. I'm going to call one and go get a beer, and I'm going to buy the beers, and I'm going to be kind, and I'm going to connect. And does that solve like a historical or systemic problem? No. Does it clear up the narrative that the media is spinning? No, but it's a small thing that you can do. And I wonder if that's going to be, you spend enough time on the internet and you think that this digital world is real, and you think that it's like something you can control, and you can't,
right,
man, you can't. But what you can control is like, who's in your phone, who can you buy a bourbon for? Who can you go help rake leaves? Is there someone in your local sphere that you can go connect with? And I don't know what you're solving, but I know that it's better than looking at your phone.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the, like we had discussion, what we're doing here is just, man, just obviously we don't get the, both ways, the communication when someone's just listening to the podcast, but it's kind of one of those things to me, as long as on those kind of lines is, hey, just because we're white dudes doesn't mean we're bad.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that narrative out there, and I'm not trying to preach on that, because a lot of white dudes are really bad.
Sure, man. Sure.
And historically, white dudes have had it really good just because they're white dudes. So but just because, one thing is historically, true more often than not, that doesn't mean it continues to perpetuate.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that it lives inside every single person. And it, I think we just want to try to connect with people. And like you said, that local connection of people. I think that's a huge thing that people just, man, if we could all just realize that we're all just trying to all live happy.
Yeah.
And trying to, survive, trying to take care of our families, every single person around the entire world, no matter which country they're from, race, religion, whatever it is, they just want to be happy. I was listening to a podcast, it was a couple weeks ago, where someone had spent time with, it was tribes in somewhere where they were hunter gatherers essentially. And their greatest day, like when the person asked them, like, hey, what's like the happiest day of your life? I feel like a lot of people these days, depending on the age, you'd be like, oh, and I got that one thing for Christmas, whatever it is. But they said, when I was able to,
kill the biggest animal and feed the village.
Yeah. When I was able to feed the village, like when I was able to help everybody out, like, and it's so weird. It goes back to the, doing something selfish, but it just happens to be for other people. Like there's some kind of weird, cycle there, but man, if we can just all realize it, we just want our families to be healthy. We want our families, to be happy. We want to be happy, and we don't want to worry about someone, kicking our proverbial door in and, ruining our lives. That's it. Like, just let me live. I want to live my life happy. I don't think anybody can disagree with one to just live a happy life. So regardless of who you are, like, maybe it is on that local level, or, it's funny. I remember thinking this morning, I often get really excited before we do these podcasts because, we get to talk to somebody, and, we've talked to a lot of really cool people. We have a lot of really cool people lined up that I'm really excited for. And last week we had a guy on that he was just a friend from my past. But he's just super chill, relaxed, willing to talk about anything. He's just one of those just really good-hearted people. And I told my wife, I said, I'm really excited right now. And it's not even like he's not famous, but just to talk to a good-hearted person. And I started thinking about today, and I was like, it's funny. I was sad because I had some disappointment because you weren't here in person. And I think that's one of the biggest, I think that's a weird disconnect. Like we've talked about before, like seeing you, I can see you on the screen. We've had some camera issues and everything else, but this is better than just talking to you on the phone, but there's just something missing when you're not sitting right in front of somebody and just having that connection. Like, I think you mentioned it earlier, like, maybe there's more some spatial connection to each other than what people like to give credence for. And I don't know what I'm talking about.
Sounds like you're trying to unite the clans, bro. That's what it sounds like.
No, Fred, that's become so clear to me teaching this past semester, seeing the students who chose to like meet in person and share space, and then the students who decided to attend via Zoom. And just to be clear, like when they attend via Zoom, we can't make them turn their cameras on. You're sort of, or I am at least, because I'm so used to like being in a moment, as we're in a moment now, and like talking. I'm really not the best at like scrolling through the chat and saying like, All right, Allie, do you have any thoughts on, I'm not good at like engaging,
Sure.
but
Right.
they're very much, I think you're right to think about it in terms of connectedness. Like I had completely normal and completely great connections with students who sat in a room with me, even though they were wearing masks and I had this big piece of plexiglass, between us. We did some really great work together. We had some really great moments and some generative discussions. And I can't tell you how many kids on Zoom I wouldn't know them if I crossed them in the street. I don't
Right.
I don't know what their voice sounds like. I don't know what their face looks like. I know what they're writing. I mean, they submitted stuff. But yeah, it's very you're really limited in terms of how you can connect if you're not at the fire, at that bonfire, sharing that space together.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, even now, like I know we had some camera issues
Yeah.
a little bit ago. Um, I was listening and I heard everything you saying, but like I found myself like trying to figure something out. So because I knew like that visual helps,
Yeah.
but it was like I now just thinking about it, it's like I feel like I lost a little piece of that, and that makes me sad. But but I guess like moving forward, I just you know, where do we go from here? I know I know we've kind of hammered the COVID thing, and it is a disconnect. And man, I wish we could. I remember at the beginning people saying like, oh, like it's you're doing damage to these kids that are in school and having this social interaction and all these things. And I'm not much of a social being, like I said in the beginning. I also subscribe to the introvert.
Mhm.
I like being home. I was like, when I was like, I don't have to go to the office. I can hang out at home all day and do my work, and I don't have to like. And now, like, I have a reason to not go hang out with people. Sign me
Great.
up, But even
That's me. That's
yeah, but
me.
like a
Yeah,
year
that's me.
later, like I'm still great. I'm still happy. I'm still enjoying my
Yeah.
family and what we're doing. But I understand how some people that are much more social than I am, and especially my child, she loves school. Only child, so she loves it even more because she gets to interact with other kids more, and it's like maybe these people have a point. We need some interaction, and especially doing it. This podcast and everything. There's something to our beings that need that person to person interaction with other people, and I don't know what it is. I'm not professing to understand it all, but there is something to it. And I think maybe, hopefully, this year moving forward, that we'll see that as a human race, and be able to do something positive with that, and understanding that we're just all trying to get through. You know?
That sounds like an end note, man. What a great note to conclude on. We're all just trying to get through.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
we can. I mean, unless you got something additional. I know it's super bummer. We've been talking for over 3 hours, but with
Yeah.
technical difficulties, if you gotta roll, we can call it, and maybe we can adjust this a little bit, and we can do another talk again someday
I think
soon.
we should. Yeah, and I think I know what we need to address in our next one. So I gather, Fred, that you're a bit of a conspiracy guy. You're into you're oh, let me rephrase.
That's
You're open to alternate explanations.
Yes,
I
thank
think
you. That's what it
yeah,
is.
man.
It's not
So
conspiracies. I am open to
I am
alternative
too.
explanations,
I am
Tony. I like
too.
that.
I am too. Yeah, I am too. And I think maybe one of the things we can talk about, if, and I would take this as an assumption, I would take this as a fairly self-evident assumption. If we all know that we need each other, right? If we all know that at the end of the day, across race, across gender, across political persuasion, we are trying to survive, and that we need to do that together. We may want to talk about, and again, this may veer into the conspiracy realm. Are there organizations out there invested in keeping us from acting on that? In other words, are there organizations out there invested in dividing?
He's going deep, Tony.
Listen, I'm minor league as far as cryptozoology and conspiracy. However, I hang out with some true blue theorists, and so I enjoy thinking about that as I do many of those theories. So maybe for the next talk, and I hope there is a next talk, man.
I'd love me know right now. We'll schedule it on air so you can't back out. I'm just messing.
I think we scratched the surface of some really important stuff. But yeah, that's something to think about, man. If we all know this, are we taking that knowledge out into a neutral realm where like the division we see is because of misunderstanding or just like basic human brokenness? Or are there actual organizations and forces out there that want to keep people from having that realization? In other words, want to divide into tribes and divide into groups. It is worth a chat, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll even add on to that where there's a little bit of both, and maybe the potential of that. We know that, we like to think that we're some advanced, crazy species. And for what we can see, I mean, we're as good as it gets. And then people go, well, we're not that great, so we're not that good. Okay. And there's people that are smart enough that I would suggest that even on a person-to-person level, exploit the chinks in our armor as humans and our lack of our potential to get upset at certain things. There's people I think we're just smart enough to realize that we can be manipulated, and people do that on purpose. You know what I mean? So it's like this weird thing where we're not maybe as smart and awesome as we think we are, but we're smart and awesome enough to realize that we're not as smart and awesome as we think we are. So we're able to exploit, those things in our fellow humans.
Yeah. We're the audience member at a magic show that says, I know there's a sleight of hand going on here, but I didn't quite catch it. I know something's not right. I'm under some kind of spell, but I'm smart enough to know that, but I'm not quite smart enough to tell you how he's doing it.
And then the magician knows that, so he plays on it even more to make you think that he's actually doing magic.
Exactly. Which is the greatest clue, right? If we know where the magician wants us to look, then we know where he doesn't want us to look.
Right. Unless he's good to know that, to backplay that, to know he doesn't. It's a whole cycle.
So the media is not fake. The media is actually true now. No. It's that'll be the next one, man. We got to talk about that.
We'll talk about what we want.
Additionally, I'm really interested. You said something earlier. You said you indicated like this eagerness to believe. If somebody tells you, that the Earth is flat, your knee-jerk response isn't, "Come on, man, that's ridiculous." It's, "What? Talk to me." And that's my knee-jerk position as well, is just one of openness. And so I'm interested in that psychology. Is like, is there a gene, or is there a thought pattern that is more eager to believe and therefore more open to theories about Bigfoot, aliens, Loch Ness, what have you? Yeah, man. Yeah. So listen to a song before the next meeting. It's by a singer-songwriter out of Winnipeg. His name's John K. Sampson, and he wrote a song called Bigfoot about a Bigfoot enthusiast. And the best line in the song is, the visions that I see believe in me. Oh. The visions that I see believe in me. And so think about, a lot of times when we talk about whether it's religious faith or conspiracy theory, we only think about it from the perspective of the believer, right? This guy who thinks the earth is flat, or this guy who thinks he's talking to God when he prays. We don't often think about psychologically what's being offered to that person from this object of faith or this object of belief. So I don't know, man. We can crack that can open next time.
Yeah, well, hopefully next time it's
in person in a cabin where we do music and a podcast. You down for that?
Yeah, man.
I'll make it happen.
I got to get my chops back. I gave when we finished that.
I remember you saying
North
that.
Carolina,
Man. You gave Matt your guitar.
I gave my brother. My brother had just finished his recovery program or stage 1 of it, and he was in stage 2, which afforded a little bit more freedom. And he was looking for a guitar, and so I gave him mine. I hadn't played I've not touched a guitar since we were in that cabin. Yeah, man.
No, do we? I mean, we'll send you a guitar. I mean, I will. I feel like that's a noble. I will buy you a guitar right now. I probably shouldn't, but I would.
No,
I feel like you need a guitar in your hands.
I could get my hands on one. It'll come back, man. It's, as you know, it's like riding a bike. It'll come back, but we have to make music again, man. We didn't get into that during this conversation, but I think some really unique things happened on that trip.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I still recall it very fondly. It was so fortuitous for me. I was at a real low point. This was before I did my grad programs, and I was working the worst job I've ever had. I was drinking as heavily as I've ever drank. I needed that. I mean, it was a sort of lifeline for me. And I still listen to the music, and I hear that. I hear the sound of people getting together and needing what was taking place in that space, because they were all going back to something that was not deadly, but maybe a little less magical.
Yeah, I have no words. I'm not even going to try to attempt to describe it but it just, there was something that happened that time frame. And I feel like I have that in my last probably 10 years where there's these moments in time where I can go back to and say that point was when this changed for me. And like, if it wasn't for this, then this. It was kind of like I used to play a lot of video games. I feel like it's like a video game where, like, as you take the steps, like the step forms in front of you. And sometimes it's flat, or sometimes you take a step up. And that was, I can say, that was one time in my life where that was a step up. It was a step, or it was a doorway into a new thing. It was a step to a different dimension, in my life for sure. And it's weird that, not weird. Maybe it's super weird. I don't know. The fact that, it was with, two people that I'd never seen in my life, and I haven't seen in person since. One of them apparently is moving to Ohio, and here we are with another one. I unless people have that kind of, thing that's happened to them, I don't think you can really understand that. But we hope to see you again soon. I'd rather see you on here very soon than wait till be in person. But I think we need
I'll make it happen. Bro, I'm the matchmaker. I'll make it happen.
Yeah, I got a vacation to use.
So I will make it happen. So we'll talk about some dates, brother. Definitely appreciate you. Love you, man. Love everything you're doing, and I look forward to seeing you continue creating that art that comes alive and touches people. So
yeah, keep us posted. Let us know. We'll make sure to talk about it, because you're a special creature on this planet, man.
Listen, guys, I love y'all too. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful, and this was, I don't know, this was much needed, and I appreciate you. Keep doing this work, man. Keep making this space and starting these fires. And Tony, we'll talk about a date. Talk about the next bonfire.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Let's get to it.
The next bonfire. I like that. Thanks.
All right, guys.
Have a
Later,
good one,
brother.
Dan.
Yep. We'll see you around.